Just to be honest, I'm smoking no chronic while speaking Ebonics, finesse 100. Focus on making some money, get on the track and go dummy. Bitches a rap like a mommy, I'm a human tsunami. Shoot up your block with a Tommy, as soon as they see me they running. Niggas they know how I'm coming, hop out the car and I'm dumping. Bagging and flipping, no fumble, paper I washing, no tumble. I am so humble, I am so ready to rumble. Swing at your face and you stumble. Nigga, I do what I wanna, just to be honest. Nigga, I do what I wanna, just to be honest. Just to be honest, nigga, I do what I wanna, just to be honest. Just to be honest.
What on, family? It's your boy Street Newz TV. Back at y'all with another episode of International Stepperz. And this episode is going to be about none other than Yahweh ben Yahweh, a.k.a. the Son of God.
Now I'd like to introduce myself to you. My name is Yahweh ben Yahweh. I am God, the Son of God. I am the one the whole earth has been waiting on.
Yahweh ben Yahweh was born Hulan Mitchell, October 27, 1935, and he's originally from a small town called Kingfisher, Oklahoma. Yahweh ben Yahweh began the Yahweh movement in 1979. It was based out of Miami, Florida, but before that, he was a part of the Nation of Islam. Now, what I find to be ironic is that most people that come in contact with the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad are in some way, shape, fashion, or form enlightened by those teachings. From Malachi Z. York to Yahweh ben Yahweh to Khalid Muhammad to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan
to Malcolm X.
You name it. If they have came in contact with the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, 9 times out of 10, they're very knowledgeable.
Yahweh ben Yahweh was one of the few that came in contact with the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and shortly after started his own organization. In the 1980s, Yahweh ben Yahweh began to purchase property in or around the Liberty City and Opelika areas. Yahweh ben Yahweh and the Nation of Yahweh actually began to boost the economy. Mind you, this organization grew to become worth $250 million. That's $250 million that they were worth. The government eventually began investigating Yahweh ben Yahweh because not only was he worth $250 million, but the teachings of Yahweh ben Yahweh was kind of a black nationalist teaching mixed with Christianity, in which he proclaimed himself to be the Son of God. He actually gained followers that were very loyal to him to the point to where if he said to kill you, they would kill you, no questions asked. And once you begin to gain power such as this, we know that the government is going to step in and they're going to try to stop you. Therefore, the J. Edgar Hoover destruction of the Black Messiah plan was set forth once again. The Nation of Yahweh was deemed a cult with very strict rules. And a lot of people that joined the Nation of Yahweh, after being in the Nation of Yahweh for a while, they began to backpedal. They began to want to leave the group. But according to some of the members that actually left the group and some of the members that actually got shot or maimed attempting to leave the group, there was no way to leave the Nation of Yahweh once you joined, once you became a member. And everything that you owned, everything that you made was brought to the Nation of Yahweh once you joined. In order for you to be placed in the inner circle in the temple of Yahweh, according to certain members, you had to destroy somebody of the Caucasian race and bring back a souvenir such as a body part.
They say that you have suggested or taught that they bring back the head of a white person in a bag.
How are you sitting here? There wouldn't be any white people if that was so. There's no heads of white people anywhere. Have you read of any? Have you read of bodies of white people being around all over America without their heads? That's ridiculous, isn't it?
Some people say that they actually wanted to leave the nation of Yahweh, but they knew that if they left the nation of Yahweh, they would be deemed hypocrites and probably murdered.
Someone went against Yahweh, they were declared hypocrites. Then one of them showed up at the temple. He was beaten, tied up, gagged with tape around his nose and his mouth, wrapped in some kind of material, put in the trunk
Of a car.
That's the last I saw of him. And I read the next day in the paper that he was beheaded.
The victim was former Yahweh Ashton Green. He was reportedly beheaded while he was still alive. When two other ex-members went to police about Green's murder, they were shot within hours. One died. The other is in a witness protection program.
There was a couple that was originally a part of the nation of Yahweh that had allegedly found out about a murder that was done on the orders of Yahweh ben Yahweh. And they later went to the police and reported this murder. Later on that night, when they made it home, they were both shot. The man was shot, he ended up dying. The woman ended up being shot and stabbed, and she ended up living. There was also a situation that took place between the Yahwehs and two tenants of a building that the Yahwehs were trying to purchase in Opelika.
I get eviction notice. I don't care what they say. I do, because they ain't going in. Just simple as that. Right, fat girl? Stand around and look foolish if you want to. Yahweh.
The Yahwehs were basically evicting people out of an apartment that they had purchased. And the people that they were evicting had short notice, so they literally didn't have anywhere to go. And there was two tenants, two men that contacted a lawyer and had the lawyer draw up the paperwork and to call the Yahwehs and tell the Yahwehs that they cannot legally put these people out of the apartment complex.
How many people are shooting? I don't know. All we hear is gunshots. And there's a whole lot of Yahweh people around here, and it's like causing confusion.
Opelika apartment complex, caught in the middle of a tense takeover, is now the scene of a murder investigation.
Two men were shot to death early this morning at the complex, taken over by Yahwehs.
The sister of one of the victims was certain the Yahwehs had killed him.
They were the only ones out there.
They being?
Yahweh, they was the only ones out here on post. And I ran to them and asked them what happened. They don't know that some guys shot and ran.
There was a guy that went by the name of Robert Rozier. He was actually an ex-NFL football player, and he was said to be the hitman on 7 murders orchestrated by Yahweh ben Yahweh. And in this case, he was actually the one that killed these two guys. This dude was basically shunned from the community for what he did. Yahweh ben Yahweh completely separated himself from the actions of Robert Rozier.
And I want you to know, just like the federal government judged our whole nation guilty of what one wicked bastard did in opposition to what I teach, and they charged us guilty, and that all of us have to pay $1 million.
Through his confessions and many other people's confessions, they were actually able to tie Yahweh ben Yahweh into 12 murders. Apparently, Yahweh ben Yahweh had what they called death angels. And what these death angels would do is carry out the hits that were orchestrated by Yahweh ben Yahweh, such as people trying to leave the organization, people being deemed as hypocrites, people that would seek to harm the nation of Yahweh in any type of way. The death angels were dedicated to the teachings of Yahweh ben Yahweh, and they would do anything to prove themselves. And because of the testimony of Robert Rozier, Yahweh ben Yahweh was tried and convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. He received an 18-year sentence in 1991. He ended up getting out in 2001. He ended up dying 6 years later in 2007. What could we learn about Yahweh ben Yahweh in this whole situation? Well, for one, I believe that Yahweh ben Yahweh was smart enough not to send a hit on two tenants that lived in a building that he was convicting people out of. I think that Robert Rozier acted on his own because he felt that if he did this, he would be looked at, or he would be exalted in the eyes of Yahweh ben Yahweh, and ultimately it ended up destroying the nation of Yahweh. We as teachers or leaders must always be cautious about the things that we teach and the things that we instruct our flock to do. Sometimes our words can be misconstrued, and people will go and do things because they believe that it's the right thing. Also, this is what plagues our people to this day. Guys want to just go and do stuff without instruction. Guys want to take it amongst themselves to do things with no instruction, and this has the potential to harm the whole group. This is what the FBI needed to close in on Yahweh, and this is what they used to destroy a $250 million enterprise. This has been the story of Yahweh ben Yahweh. It's your boy, SNTV. I'm out. Preview for the next international Stepperz. He's definitely one of the most ruthless, if not the most ruthless guys that I've ever did a video on. For you to order hits on children and then brag about it puts you in a whole nother class of evil.
Little baby.